Hey everyone, what's going on? Good morning, here from Jerusalem. Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we are studying Daf Chaf of Masechta Shabbos. What is exciting about this Daf is that it's the last Daf of the first parak of Shabbos, of the parak of Yitzios HaShabbos. So we are going to be concluding the first parak of Shabbos today, which is very, very exciting. Wow, what a parak, huh? What a parak. Starting off with all that Otzai and Achnasa stuff with Erevin, and then getting in some of the, starting to see sort of malachas of Shabbos coming out, and sort of the complex way of thinking about them and conceptualizing them of the last few days. So that's been a really interesting parak. Some of the things that we will discuss today, starting cooking and baking before Shabbos. How much is considered cooked, that you should cook it to that extent already before Shabbos. Beginning with the new chapter of Bameh Madlikin. So what can be used as a wick for Shabbos candles? What oils can be used for Shabbos candles? These are some of the things that are going to come up in today's daf. There is going to be several sort of very technical things, just in terms of like what oil is this and what wick is that, so there is a lot of stuff. So there's going to be that bit, but there's also some really great stuff here. So let's get started. So we're going to get started on Daf Yud Tes Amud Beis, about 8 lines before the end of the page, at the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, "Ein solin basar batzal uveitza el kadei sheitzolim mibod yom." So do not cook, do not roast meat, onions, and eggs. Interesting, you're talking about roasting eggs, right? It actually came up in Masechta Brachos, right? I don't remember what daf it was, but right, we talked about, there's like nothing better than a roasted egg or something like that, which is interesting. But in any event, do not, only cook those things if there's enough time for them to cook before Shabbos begins. Now, we did talk the other day about exceptions to those rules, such as if you're cooking like, young goat meat, in which case, we don't have to be worried about stoking the coals because opening up the oven would be bad for it. But in the cases where you would not be allowed to have the meat cooking, or the, whatever these, the meat, the onions, and the eggs cooking over Shabbos, how much right? So they would have to cook before Shabbos commences. Ein nosnim pas l'sanur im chashecha. Do not put bread into an oven right before Shabbos. V'lo charar al gabe gechalim. Do not put, I imagine this is something like a pita dough, something, kind of like a dough that you slap on like the fire, and then it kind of cooks. Or like a lafa maybe. It would have to there would have to be enough time for it to form a crust before Shabbos begins. Rabbi Eliezer says that not just the upper crust, but also the below crust. And the Gemara is going to explain what we're talking about. What's the Tanakama talking about? What's Rabbi Eliezer talking about? Okay, so the Korban Pesach, okay, we're coming up to Pesach soon. The Korban Pesach was a gedi, it was a goat, and you would cook it whole on a spit, on a skewer, okay? So we're saying that you can lower that skewer into the oven as Shabbos is commencing. You don't have to be concerned, that maybe you'll stoke the coals. What's the Beis Hamoked, friends? The Beis Hamoked is that in the Beis HaMikdash, there was a room, and in this room, there was a big fire. And the Kohanim, because they would walk around barefoot, so it would be very cold, so there was a fire there for them to warm up. So lighting this fire in the Beis HaMoked, so you would just have to light it enough that it got started, as opposed to, says the Mishnah, uvigvulin k'dei shetechoza or berubo. In the gvulin, so now, I've always been confused on what gvulin, I've never been clear about what gvulin is, right? So I looked up over here in the Sfas Hayam. What the Sfas Hayam is, for anybody who's not familiar, the Sfas Hayam is generally in the back of the Gemaras, and he gives definitions for a lot of, for sort of the a few difficult words per page. So if you don't know a word, you can kind of look it up and hope that he's got it. And he actually does have an entry for gvulin, and he defines that as Kol Eretz Yisrael levad miYerushalayim nikra gvulin. So all of Israel that's outside of Jerusalem is what's called gvulin. Now that's a little bit confusing to me. So that's why I was always confused, because on the one end you have things like this that say that gvulin is basically anywhere outside of Jerusalem, but we're saying in the Beis HaMoked, which was in the Beis HaMikdash, right? So then you would just have to light this fire enough so that it just kind of gets started with gvulin, and then outside of Jerusalem and the rest of Israel, Kadesh or Beruba, you would need the fire to catch on the majority of sort of your bonfire, right? It wouldn't be enough to just kind of get it started in one area. It would have to have the majority of the fire lit. But what about Kilu outside of the Beis HaMoked, but still in Jerusalem? What about in Nachlaot, where I am right now, right? What do? It's not outside of Jerusalem yet. It is outside of the Beis HaMoked. So that's, I know that's why I get confused by Gvulin, because I feel like a lot of times we compare Gvulin with the Beis HaMikdash, but what about the rest of Jerusalem? I don't know. I don't know the answer. If you do, let us know, please. Rabbi Yehuda Omer bepechamin kolshu. Rabbi Yehuda says that when it comes to a fire that is made of coals, so you wouldn't have to have a majority of the fire lit, even just, one area of the fire, I guess, being lit would be enough, because the coals aren't going to go out. They're just going to continue to burn, and then, I guess, burn what is next to it, and a domino effect until the entire fire is lit. Says the Gemara, v'chama. So when the Mishnah says that you need to cook this meat and onions and eggs, who knows, maybe even cooking them together, that sounds pretty good. But in any event, it has to be cooked before Shabbos begins. How much? At what point is it considered cooked? Rare, medium, well done. What's considered cooked? Amar Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav. So says Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rav. Kadeshi itzolu mi ba'od yom k'maychel ben dusai. Michael ben Dusai. What's Michael ben Dusai? So ben Dusai was a bandit, and therefore he was always on the run, running away from the cops. So he wouldn't have time to have the luxury to kind of cook his food 100%. He would cook his food 1/3. Okay, 1/3 of what? 1/3 of well done, I assume. 1/3 of, I guess, fully cooked. So once it's already cooked 1/3 before Shabbos, that's considered cooked, and it can continue to cook on Shabbos. Okay? Itmar Nami was also stated, Amr of Asi, Amr of Yochanan, Kolshu Kamaycho ben Dusai, Ein Bo Mishum Bishulei Nachrim. So it says of Asi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that there is a halacha that's called Bishul Akum. Okay? It comes up in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, that it talks about Bishul Akum, which is that a non-Jewish person, there are different, there are different laws about Bishul Akum, but the concept is that a Jew should not eat food cooked by a non-Jewish person. That's the concept. There are questions of what types of food fall under the umbrella, qualify for Bishul Akum, but that's what Bishul Akum is. And we're saying that, however, if you have food that was already cooked 1/3, that was already cooked Kamaycho ben Dusai, so Bishul Akum is no longer a thing. It's already considered like it's cooked by the Jew. If the non-Jew cooks it the remaining 2/3 of the way, it would be okay. It would not be, you wouldn't have to worry about Bishul Akum. Tanya, we learn in a brisa, Chananya Omer says, Chananya Koshu Kamaycho ben Dusai mutul hashoso agabe kira v'afal pi she'ein grufa uktuma. So grufa uktuma, if my memory is correct, it will come up quite a bit, I think, in the 3rd parak of Hakira, which I recall to be a challenging parak. But grufa and ketuma means, grufa is to shovel away the coals, and ketuma is to basically put ash on top of the coals to dim the heat. So if you have a food that is already 1/3 of the way cooked, if it's cooked Kamaycho ben Dusai, so then you would not need to do things like shovel away the coals or dim the intensity of the heat, which by doing these things, it would basically stop the cooking process, okay? But once it's already cooked 1/3 of the way, it's already considered cooked. You can leave the coals just the way they are, even if it's going to be increasing the heat and cooking the food more, it's okay because it's already cooked, Kamaycho ben Dusai. So we see that Maycho ben Dusai is considered cooked already, and therefore, once these things that would need to be cooked before Shabbos have already been cooked 1/3, Kamaycho ben Drusai, then you can continue to let them cook on Shabbos. Zeu. Zakt the Gemara. Does Rashi say anything? 1 second, let me see something quick. Okay, fine. Weiter. Says the Gemara, Ein nosnes apas chule. So we said that if you want to put bread in the oven over Shabbos, it would have to have already cooked, it would have to already baked enough that there's a crust on the bread. And then Rabbi Eliezer added that it would have to be a lower crust. So what are we talking about? That's a kasha. Tachton ha'ech digabe toner, or dilma tachton ha'ech digabe ur. So is this tachton that Rabbi Eliezer is talking about, this underneath crust, what's considered underneath? Is underneath the part that is between the bread and the oven walls, right? The side of the bread that's connected, that's stuck on the oven walls. Or dilma tachton ha'ech digabe ur. Or maybe the tachton of the underneath of the bread would be the side that's facing the fire. Because remember, their ovens were this kind of cone shaped that had the top tip of it kind of clipped off. And so you would take the bread and just kind of slap it on the side of the oven. So you'd have the fire in the middle, which was facing one side of the bread, and then the opposite side of the bread was slapped against the wall. Okay? So which one is considered tachton? So the Gemara says, Tashma, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kadei Shikam Ponea Amidubakin Bitoner. Oh, so Rabbi Eliezer says that the bread would have to be baked enough so that the side of the dough that is connected to the oven walls would get baked, would get a crust on them. So we see that the Panea HaTachton would be the side that is connected to the walls, right? Because Rabbi Eliezer says that you would need the underneath to be get a crust, and he also says that that you need to get a crust on the side that is connected to the wall. So the underneath is the side connected to the wall. Mishal Shanasa Pesach, continues the Gemara. You can lower the Korban Pesach into the oven right before Shabbos, and we're not concerned that you're going to stoke the coals on Shabbos. My timer, how come we're not concerned that you're going to stoke the coals on Shabbos? So Mishum Tibnei Chabura is reason hain. Because when it comes to Korban Pesach, the people in the Chabura, you had to eat Korban Pesach in a group of people, right? Enough people to be able to eat the entire Korban Pesach because you didn't want to leave anything over. Okay? So you'd put together a group of people, you'd gather them together a group, and that would be your group for the Korban Pesach. And the people in the group were very fastidious about the halachos of making sure that everything when it comes to the Korban Pesach is done perfectly. So they would certainly be careful to make sure that nobody's going to stoke the coals, because they were very careful about every detail of the Korban Pesach. The Gemara asks, Halav achilo? 1 second. So the implication being that if they weren't so fastidious, then they wouldn't be allowed to cook this goat, just to kind of put it in the oven right before Shabbos. Ve'amar, Mar, didn't we say, on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, Gadya ben Sharik ben Lo Sharik Shaper Dami, that a goat that is roasting in the oven, a kid, right, meaning a baby goat, such as the baby goat that would be used for the Korban Pesach, okay, if this baby goat is cooking in the oven, whether you've sealed the oven well, whether you haven't sealed the oven well, makes no difference. You're still allowed to put it in the oven right before Shabbos, because since the wind is going to be bad for it if you open up the oven to stoke the coals, so then we don't have to be concerned that you're going to open up the oven and stoke the coals, and therefore it's completely fine. So why does it matter? I mean, it's very nice that the people making the Korban Pesach were very, makpid on every single detail, but even if they weren't, at the end of the day, it's a baby goat, and you're allowed to cook a baby goat. You're allowed to put it right in the oven right before Shabbos. So the Gemara answers, Hasa mintach achalo mintach. The difference is that on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, when we said that you're allowed to cook the kid in the oven and you don't have to worry about stoking the coals, that is because the goat was cut up into pieces, okay? And because it was cut up into small pieces, that is why if air gets in, it's bad for the meat, and therefore you're not going to let air into the oven when you open. Therefore you're not going to stoke the coals, which therefore would let air into the oven, which would be bad for the meat. However, the Korban Pesach, you had to roast whole, okay? And because it was roasting whole, the air was not bad for it, and therefore you might open up the oven in order to stoke the coals, and it wouldn't be detrimental to the meat. Therefore, it's because the people who were making the group, the chabura that was making the Korban Pesach, was very particular about every detail of making the Korban Pesach, they for sure would not, stoke the coals on Shabbos. And of course, this is, I have to assume that this is assuming when the first night of Pesach falls out on Shabbos. If it's just a regular weekday, well then it's Yontif. You're allowed to cook on Yontif. I don't see why it should be a problem. Okay. Weiter. Okay. So we say that in the Beis HaMoked, in the Beis HaMikdash, so the Kohanim, once they got the bonfire in this Beis HaMoked that they would use to warm up themselves. So once they got the fire started, then that was enough, and the fire can continue to kindle on Shabbos on its own. You wouldn't need the entire fire. You wouldn't need a majority of the fire to be lit, which is the requirement in the Gvulin. Okay, so Munani Mile, how do we know this? Where does this come from? Where does this come from that the fire in the Beis HaMoked, you can just light a little bit? So Amar Rav Huna, says Rav Huna lo sevayu eish b'chol moshvosechem. The pasuk says, it was Taka, the pasuk in this past week's Parshas Vayakel, I believe. It says, do not burn a fire in all of your homes. B'chol moshvosechem, or your settlements, your dwellings. B'chol moshvosechem yatamavir, aval atamavir b'mduas Beis HaMoked. So we make a drasha that you're not allowed to kindle a flame in your own private home, but in the Beis HaMoked, in the Beis HaMikdash, in this office, in this room, where the Kohanim would light a fire to heat up, you would be allowed to kindle a fire. So the Gemara says, 1 second, Maskefler of Chisda. If Chisda asks the Kashem of Huna, Yachi afilu b'Shabbos nami. If we're saying that the milacha of kindling a fire is only in your private home, but in the Beis HaMoked, you would be allowed to kindle a fire, so then why do we even have the requirement that you have to start it a little bit before Shabbos? Just light the entire darn thing on Shabbos, just have a bunch of wood. Shabbos comes in, we didn't light it yet, let's just light it now, because lo savaru eish, the malacha of lighting a fire on Shabbos, of kindling a fire on Shabbos, doesn't apply in the Beis HaMoked, but we're saying that you do have to kindle it already before Shabbos, at least a little bit. So it can't be that lo savaru eish doesn't apply in the Beis HaMoked. So Ela Amar Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda offers a solution, doesn't just ask questions, but he also offers a solution, which is Kra ki asa lemishnei varim u'fidarim hudasa. That pasuk of lo savaru eish b'chol moshvosechem, right, of do not kindle a fire in your homes, right, to say however but what? However but in the Beis HaMikdash, on the Mizbeach, to burn the fats and limbs, right? If you remember from the first Mishnah in Masechta Brachos, right? Hektar chalav ve'evarim. So the fats and limbs that you didn't have a chance, right, of the korbanos that you brought during that day, and you already did zrikas hadam during the day, but you didn't have a chance to put the fats for the korbanos, or the limbs of the korbanos, if it's an ola that go on the Mizbeach. So you didn't have a chance to do that yet, so you can put those on the Mizbeach on Friday night, on Shabbos, and you can light the fire for that as well. However, you wouldn't be allowed to light the fire in the Beis HaMoked. You would have to make sure that was kindled before Shabbos, at least just a little bit. So back to our question. How come it's different in the Beis HaMoked than in the rest of Israel? How come in the rest of Israel you would have to light a majority of the fire, but in the Beis HaMoked you can just light a little bit and that's enough? So the Gemara answers, "Ve Kohanim's reason hein," because the Kohanim were very fastidious. And Rashi says something interesting that in the Dibra Maskal Evarim Ufdarim Huda Asa, and it's about 5 lines into the Rashi. He says the Kohanim's reason hein shekulim hayu bnei Torah v'charedim, because all of the Kohanim were Bnei Torah and they were Charedi. V'nizkarim v'lo asu l'chatuye mishech techshach, and they're going to remember not to stoke any coals once it gets dark. Therefore, once they have lit the fire in the Beis HaMoked a little bit, it's enough, and the rest will catch, and they will keep their hands away. Continues the Gemara. But in the rest of Eretz Yisrael, outside of Jerusalem, you would need to make sure that any fire that you want lit over Shabbos. Now, also back then, I imagine that the fire was how they kept warm during the winter as well. So any fire that you're going to want to have on Friday night, make sure that it's already kindled the majority of the fire before Shabbos starts. So my Ruban, what is considered the majority? Asks the Gemara. Amar Rav, Rov kol echad ve'echad u'shmuel amar kedei shelo yomru havei eitzim v'naniach tachtein. So Rav says that the majority means that, let's say you have 10 pieces of wood in your fire. So each one of those 10 pieces of wood would have to be burning a majority of the way of their wood. And Shmuel says that no, it just needs to be lit enough so that, you know that the fire is going to be going. Meaning, I don't know, if you're lighting like a wood burning stove or something. So it takes time, it could take a few attempts to get that wood to catch, right? And you might have to put in more newspaper, things like that. So Shmuel's saying, until you're not going to have to request, right? 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 You have to light it to the extent that you're no longer going to ask anybody like, hey, bring more of that kindle wood so that we can, put it in this section so that we can make sure that it's lit. Meaning once it's already lit in a way that it's healthy and it's not going out and it's going to continue to burn how you want it, at that point, it's considered majority of the way lit and it would be acceptable and you can go into Shabbos like that. Tani Rav Chia l'siyu'e l'shmuel. Oh, Ashanda. So Rabbi Chia is coming to teach something to support Shmuel. Now Rabbi Chia was Rav's uncle. And sure enough, Rabbi Chia is coming to support Shmuel, Rav's bar plukta, the guy who's arguing with Rav. So much for that. Okay, so Rav Chia, who's Rav Chia anyways? I assume that is Rabbi Chia. Maybe not. Who knows? Maybe it's somebody else actually. Maybe it wasn't Rav's uncle Rabbi Chia. Maybe it was Rav Chia who was somebody else. In any event, he brings a brisa to support Shmuel, which is that it says in the context of the menorah, that when you light the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, you have to kindle the wick until the flame is going up on its own and it doesn't need assistance from anything else. I guess from the candle that's lighting it, but you have to kindle it until it's already lit on its own. And therefore here as well, you would have to light this fire until, like Shmuel says, that you don't have to ask anybody to bring you some more kindle wood. The fire is lit and healthy. Okay, fine. Eitzichidi. What about what if you have just one log? One big, as my friend Pesach Stadlin calls it, a big hunker of wood. So what if you have one big hunker? So Rav Amar Rov Ovyo, Rav says that it would have to be lit until the majority of its thickness, I guess until it really gets into the hunker, until it gets really into this log of wood, and then it's considered rov of the thickness. Then it's considered lit. Some say no, it doesn't really have to burn into the thickness of the wood. It just needs to really burn the majority of the outside. Let's say the bark or whatever. As long as it kind of the fire eats through the majority of the circumference of the log, so then it would be considered. The majority of the circumference of the log would be considered already burning rov. Now this is cool. Amar Rav Papa says, Rav Papa hilkach ba'inan rov ovyo uva'inan rov ekefo. Therefore Rava says, Therefore Rav Papa says, we're going to be choshesh for both opinions of what Rav said, which is it would need to be burning on the majority of its outside, of its circumference, as well as the majority of its thickness. Okay, fine. Why is this interesting? Because this seems to be a habit of Rav Papa. In Masechta Brachos, 3 times he said, therefore we're going to do both of them. He said it on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis in the context of the Birchos HaTorah, right? There was 2 Birchos HaTorah. There was, right, no Stein HaTorah, V'hayrav Na Hashem Elokeinu, all that. There was also the Baruch Atah Hashem Asher B'chabanu Mikol Ha'amim, right? Those were 2 different opinions. I think it was Rav and Rav Hamnuna. Rav Papa says, therefore we're going to say both of them. Also, when it comes to the bracha that we make on a rainbow, right? It says, Zocha Bris V'nam Bebriso, and then there was another opinion that said, V'kayim P'mamaro. Rav Papa says, therefore we say both of them. And he says it on the very next Amud, on Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis, right? He says also in the context of Baruch Kela Odos or Rova Odos, and he says therefore we say both of them. And here also he says, we have these 2 opinions by the majority of the circumference or the majority of the Rov, and Rav Papa says therefore we're going to do both of them. Very, very, very interesting, to see him sort of It's cool when you see, inter mesechtas, between different mesechtas, the same rabbis out of these, they're similar, unique approaches. Kitanai, now we say that this machloka, that now these two perspectives on how to understand Rav, whether it's the majority of the circumference or the majority of the thickness, is actually machlokas Tanaim. Rabbi Chia Amar, says Rabbi Chia, Kadesh Shachis Ha'etz Mimlechas Ha'uman, that I guess for a wood to be considered burned, it has to be burnt enough so that a craftsman wouldn't want to use that, and Rashi says that is the majority of its thickness. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Kadesh Te'achiz Ha'esh Mishneit Stadin, that the fire has to catch onto the wood from both sides, and Rashi says of its circumference. Okay, so that's the outside, so it's machlokas tanaim. V'alf b'shein raya ledavar zeichel ledavar, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, even though I can't prove that I'm right, I have a pasuk that I can kind of like say alludes to my opinion at least, that it says as shnei ktsosav achla ha'esh v'tocho nachar hayitzlach lemlacha, that if you have a piece of wood, this is a pasuk in Yechezkel describing, I believe, a grapevine in that context. Anyways, it says if the two sides of its circumference are already consumed, then that must mean that the inside is also completely dried out and consumed. Hayitzlach lemlacha, will it be usable for work anymore? And therefore Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira once said that pasuk at least alludes to his opinion, which is that once the circumference, the rove of the circumference is burnt, that would be already considered as if it's completely burnt. Okay, fine. Now, basically for the rest of the page, for the rest of the daf today, it's going to get pretty technical. Understanding burning different things, different wicks, different oils, all sorts of things like that. So here we go. This is a pasuk, actually a very interesting pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyah, where Yirmiyah had Baruch ben Neriah, I believe it was, write down this nevuah on a scroll that all sorts of bad things were going to happen, and that scroll ended up making it all the way to the king Yehoiakim. Yehoiakim then ordered that this scroll should be burnt. And it says, Va'ach lefanav mivo ares, that this fireplace was burning in front of King Yehoiakim. My ach, what is an ach? Amarav achvana. So Rav said it's a willow. I guess a willow branch was burning, I guess. Shmuel amar eitzim shnidliku ba'achva. Shmuel says that it was actually a bunch of trees, a bunch of wood that was burning together. Okay, I guess like with brotherhood, a bunch of wood. There was a person in the market who said, who wants to buy achvana? And they found, what is this achvana? It's aravta, it's a willow branch, it's an arava, like I guess Rav was saying. Okay, fine. Rav Huna, said Rav Huna, konim ein tzrichin rov ogda, ein tzrichin rov. If you have reeds, these like grassy kind of things, these reeds, you do not, so if you have just a bunch of random reeds and you light like one of them, or a minority of them, that would be enough because they catch very well, and all of them are going to catch. However, ogdan tzrichin rov. But if you collect them into a bundle, then you're going to need rov, and as Rashi says, because in that case the fire will not get through so good. Okay. Gar'inin, if you have date pits, okay, ein tzrichin rov. You do not, they're also, I guess, very flammable. You would not need to light a majority of them. Nisanim b'chosalos tzrichin rov, but if you kind of gather them together in some kind of reed receptacle and put them into fire, then it would only be considered lit once the majority of them are lit. Also, as Rashi says, because the fire won't get into them so good. Maskefla Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says, what? That makes no sense. Adraba ibcha mistabra. The opposite makes sense. Konim mivadron. If you have a bunch of reeds that aren't bundled together, then they're scattered. And, even if one reed burns, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to ignite the one next to it. Maybe it's not even touching it. So, ogdan lo mevadron. But if you bundle them up into one group, well, then they're all touching each other. And, once you light one, it'll just continue to burn the things next to it. Gar'inin mevadron. Same thing with date pits. If they're not bundled together or, in this container, well then they're all separate, they're not necessarily going to light the one next to it. Nisanim b'chosalos lo mevadron. Yet if you put them into this reed, cylinder, container, so then they're all just going to light each other. So then in that case you shouldn't need rov. Okay, fine. So far we have two opinions. We have Rav Chizda, we have Rav Huna. Now we're going to have another opinion. Itmar, Rav Kana. Rav Kana has some kind of like middle ground, which is kanim, when it comes to reeds, she'ogdan tzrichim rov. So if you bundle them together by reeds, you would need a majority lit. Lo ogdan ein tzrichin rov, but if they are not bundled together, then you wouldn't need a majority. I guess each one would somehow just light the next one that's next to it. Gar'inin tzrichin rov, nisanim b'chosalos ein tzrichin rov. When it comes to these pits, however, when they are not bundled together, you would have to have a majority lit. But if you put them into this, container, this reed container, or it says made with lulavim, I don't know, like a palm frond container, I guess, you wouldn't need a rov because then they would light each other. Okay. Tani Rav Yosef taught, Arba Meduros Ein Tzrichin Rov. There are 4 types of bonfires that do not need to be lit in their majority. You could just light it a little bit and continue to light. Shel Zephes, and that is if it's made out of pitch. Vishal Gofris, if it's made out of sulfur. Vishal Gvina, if it's made out of dry cheese. Vishal Revav, if it's made out of fatty materials. Okay, in those cases you don't need to light a majority. B'masnisa tani, we learn in a brisa, af shel kash v'shel gvava. Even these bonfires that are made out of straw or out of, I have here from the Sefaria, rakings of wood gathered from the field. Okay, so if you have a bonfire made out of hay, or or is that straw? Straw, I guess. Is straw and hay the same thing? I don't know. I guess it's straw. And also these rakings that come from the field. Rabbi Yochanan, Eitzim shel Bavel ein tzrichin rov. The wood of the Babylonian wood does not need to be lit in a rov. It will burn very well. Maskefla Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks a kasha. What is this Babylonian wood that doesn't need to be lit in its majority? Ilema silte, if you say that it's slivers of wood, well, hashta psila amar ula amadlik tzarich sheadlik birov ayotze, silte mibaya. Ula said that when it comes to a wick, now a wick is going to be, more flammable than wood, than thin slivers of wood. And when it comes to a wick, Ula said that you would have to light a majority of the wick. So, how could it be that a wick, which is more flammable than wood, Ula would say that you have to light a majority, yet for some reason, this wood, you can only light a little bit. That wouldn't make sense. So, Ella, Amar, Rav Yosef, Socha da Arza, Rami bar Abba, Amar Zaza. So, Rav Yosef said, what this Babylonian wood that only needs to be lit a little bit is that it's a branch of a cedar tree, okay, which I guess is very flammable. And Rami bar Abba says that it is hyssop. I think hyssop is za'atar, but I guess that would be very flammable. Hadron alach Yitzias Shabbos. And with that very exciting climax, we complete Yitzias Shabbos. Mazel tov, everybody. Weiter in Shas. Now, this is interesting. We move on to the second parak. The second parak is what's called Bameh Madlikin. So first of all, some people might recognize Bameh Madlikin from Shul on Friday night. Ashkenazim say, and also Sfardim, but not Nusach Sfardim. They say Kagavna, which is awesome. Try it out sometime, if you haven't already. Anyways, there are people who say on Friday night before Mariv, they say Bameh Madlikin, Uvama'e Madlikin. That is this parak that we're learning right now. So, a few interesting things. Well, this Mishnah is very technical. We're about to get into some really technical definitions. But also what I find very interesting about this Mishnah is, if you remember at the very beginning of Masechta Brachos, right? The Masechta Brachos starts out, the beginning of the Gemara is Tana Heichakoi, right? The Katani, Me'emasai. Right? The Mishnah in Brachos begins with, at what time do you read Kriyat Shema? To which the Gemara says, wait a second, what time do you read Kriyat Shema? What is Kriyat Shema? Do I even have to read Kriyat Shema? I have no clue what this thing is. Why are you talking about times? First tell me what it is. I kind of feel the same way about this Mishnah, Bameh Madlikin. With which wicks can we light these candles? What candles? Hanukkah candles, Shabbos candles, what candles are we talking about? Whoever said I have to light candles on Friday night? Like, of course, we know, right? Friday night candles. That's Friday night, right? Chabad is in the public giving out candles all the time, right? But, I don't know. Like, I never saw anywhere yet that we have to light candles. All of a sudden, we're getting into halachas. Use this wick, don't use that wick. You can use that oil, don't use that oil. What are we even talking about? And the Gemara hasn't really said, which is interesting to me. Says the Mishnah, with which wicks are we allowed? Well, no, with what are we allowed to light and to kindle, and with what are we not allowed to kindle? And now the Mishnah begins talking about wicks, and then it's going to move on to oils. So, madlikin lo belechesh So I'm going to be looking at some translations here. So we cannot light with cedar bast. That is like some kind of like flammable thing that they make out of cedar. Okay. V'lo b'chosen, not with uncombed flax. V'lo b'chalach, and you're not allowed to light with a wick that's made out of raw silk. V'lo b'psilas ha'idan, you cannot light a wick that is made out of willow bast. V'lo b'psilas hamidbar, and not with a wick made out of desert weed. V'lo biroka she'al pnei hamayim, and not with the green moss on the surface of the water. Okay, you can't make wicks out of those things. Now, what about oils? V'lo b'zefes, you can't use pitch as like a fuel. V'lo b'shaiva, you can't use wax. V'lo b'shemen kik, you can't use castor oil, which is like the oil of some plant, I think. V'lo b'zefes, wait, I just did that. V'lo b'shemen sreifa, not with burnt oil. V'lo b'alya, you can't use the fat, the fat of a sheep tail. V'lo b'chelev, and not, chalavim are like these other fats from an animal. There's a difference between shuman and chelev, right? Shuman are fats that we're allowed to eat. Chelev are these other fats that we're not allowed to eat. So you can't use chelev as your fuel. Nachum Amadi omer, malikim b'chelev mevushal. Nachum Amadi, who's Nachum Amadi? Anybody ever heard of him before? I don't know. We've heard of him now. Nachum Amadi says that you're allowed to use chelev that has been cooked. And as we're going to learn tomorrow, that once chelev has been cooked, it's already, it catches the wick very well. You see, the problem with all these oils is they don't catch to the wick well, and therefore they don't burn well, and you might end up tilting the shemayata, you might end up tilting the candle. But once you've cooked these these fats and melted them down, so then they catch well. The Chacham say, no, even if you've cooked down the fat so that it's melted, and it would be a good fuel, still we don't use it. Lechesh. The Gemara says, now we're going to go through all of these things in the Mishnah and we're going to define them. Lechesh. What is lechesh? So we define lechesh as being cedar bast. Okay? So we said socha da arza. So the Gemara first says that it's just a cedar branch. But socha da arza eitz ba'amu. What do you mean? Cedar branch is just wood. We need a wick here, not a stick of wood. So be'amranisa de isba. No, we're talking about the wool, the woolly substance, right? Apparently between, I don't know, maybe somebody could tell us, but apparently between the bark and the wood of a cedar, there is like some woolly kind of stuff, and that is what we would use, and you cannot use that for a wick because it doesn't burn well. V'lo b'chosen, you can't use chosen. So we define chosen as uncombed flax. Let's see. Amar Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef ne'ores shel pishton. It is this like sort of these small pieces of flax, that like shakes off of it. So Amar le, right, when you like clean flax, so it's like all these little pieces of flax. So you can't use that for a wick. Amar le Abaye. Abaye said, 1 second, Rav Yosef. Ve'aksiv, we have a pasuk that says ve'ah chason le'ne'ores, that the chason was used for ne'ores, for like this burning, for this like these scraps of wood. So we see that chason and ne'ores are separate things. So don't tell me that chosen is this ne'ores. So Ella Amar Abaye, rather Abaye says, Kitana dedayik v'lo nafitz. Rather it is flax that has been crushed but not combed. So that's uncombed flax. You cannot use that for a wick. V'lo b'chalach, you can't use chalach as a wick. What did we say that was? We said that was raw silk. Okay, Amar Shmuel, she'iltinu l'chol nachuse yama. So Shmuel said, I asked all of the seafarers. So now, what sea are we talking about, right? Shmuel lived in Narda. Narda was like central Iraq. There was no like big sea there. So, what I think it was probably the, Euphrates. I believe that, Narda was not far from the Euphrates. So maybe he asked the people who would go down, who would travel on the Euphrates River, and he asked them, he said, do you know what chalach is? I wonder also why you would think to ask them about wicks. I wonder if it was maybe, and whenever there was like some kind of like exotic thing that he didn't know about, like maybe the instinct was like, well, let me ask the people who travel a lot. Maybe they've seen interesting things, such as kalach. So Shmuel says, I asked all of the people who go down to the sea, ve'amrili, and they said to me, kulcha shmei. Oh, you must be talking about kulcha, right? Kalach is actually referred to nowadays as kulcha. Okay? Rav Yitzchak bar Zeira Amar Gushkara, and Rav Yitzchak bar Zeira explained that this is the cocoon of the silkworm. Okay? Ravin va'Abaye havu yasvei kami derabbanan Nechemya achva dereish gelusa. So Ravin and Abaye were sitting before Rabbanan Nechemya, who was the brother of the Reish Gelusa. Okay? Chazid avalavish mitachsa. Okay? And they saw that this that Rabbanan Nechemya was wearing some kind of clothing made out of this kalach, out of this silk. Amalei Ravin Abaye, hainu kalach tetnan. So Ravin then says to Abaye, hey, look, he's wearing something made out of this kalach from the Mishnah, b'mem adlikin. Amalei, anan shira pranda karinanle. And Abaye is like, oh yeah, interesting, okay, yeah, that we call that substance shira pranda. Right? So, okay, got it. So I guess Shira Pranda is Kalach. 1 second. Meisvei, we have a kasha. Hashiraim ve'akalach ve'asirikin chayavim b'tzitzis. We say that Shiraim and Kalach and Sirikin are chayavim b'tzitzis. So what do we see? That Shira Pranda must be something different than Kalach, because we say Shiraim and Kalach are chayavim b'tzitzis. So it must be two different things. So tiyufta. So it's a kasha on the assumption that this Shira Pranda is what Kalach is. Or you could say Shira Lechud v'Shira Pranda Lechud. No, you could say that Shira, which is different than Kalach and is Chayav and Tzitzis, is different than Shira Pranda. Shira Pranda is Kalach, Shira alone is something else. Okay, fine. V'lo b'psila sa'idan. And we don't use, how do we define psila sa'idan? We define that as willow bast. Don't use willow bast. So the Gemara says achvina, yeah, willow, right? Arava, willow. Ravin va'Abaye avu ka'azle befixa de Tamurisa. So Ravin and Abaye were walking in the valley of Tamurisa. Chazinu lahanu aravta, and they saw willows. Amalei Ravin Abaye hanu idan ditnan. So again, Ravin says to Abaye, says, oh, look. There's the idan from the Mishnah. So Amalei ha'i eitz ba'amahu. So Abaye says, what do you mean? How could that willow be the idan from the Mishnah? It's just a tree. So kalach v'achvelei amronisa devene bene. So Ravin then peeled away the bark, and he showed that between the bark and the tree there is some woolly substance, and that would not be allowed to be used for a wick for Shabbos. V'lo b'psilas hamidbar, you cannot use desert weeds, and that would be shavra, which is mullein. I don't know, mullein, some plant that grows. V'biroka sha'al chule, right? And we don't use the green moss that floats on the water. Maihi, what is this green moss that floats on the water? So if you're going to say that it's basically just this green moss that literally floats on water, but if but that kind of would fall apart and you wouldn't really be able to make a wick out of it. So Rav Papa says it's actually the moss that gets on a boat. If you have a boat that's sitting in the same place for a while, so this moss gets on the metal of the boat, and that would be something you can use for a wick. But don't use it for a wick, because we don't use that for wicks for Shabbos. Tana, Hosifu alein semer v'shel seyar. We learn in Bryce that they actually added on to the things that you're not allowed to make a wick from. You can't make a wick from wool, and you also can't make a wick from hair. V'tana tidan. How come our Tana did not include them in the list if you can't use them? It's because semer mechavetz kavitz, because wool, it just burns way too quickly. It shrinks and burns way too quickly, and therefore, it wouldn't be a good wick. Seyar just kind of like chars up. So these wouldn't be good wicks. Oh, so therefore, our Tana there was nothing to talk about. Wool just immediately shrivels up, hair just immediately chars, and obviously it can't be a good wick. So our Tana didn't feel the need to teach it. V'lo bezefes, we do not. So now, okay, moving on to fuels for the fire, right? The oils that you cannot use. You can't use pitch. Zefes, zifta, shaiva, kirusa. Okay, zefes is zefes, shaiva is shaiva, right? Pitch is pitch, wax is wax. Okay, zefes is pitch, shaiva is wax. Great. Tana. We learn in a Brisa, Adkan psul psilos, mikan be'elach psul shmanim. So up until zefes, up until pitch, we were talking about wicks that are not allowed to be used. From this point on, we are talking about, from pitch and onwards, we are talking about oils that are not allowed to be used. Okay? Pshita, isn't that obvious? Isn't that obvious that up until now we were talking about like wick kind of things, and now we're talking about oily kind of things? So the Gemara answers, Shaiva, it's trichale. No, we actually needed to make that distinction because I might have gotten confused when it comes to wax. What about wax? Ma'udetema lifsilos nami lochazia kamash malan. I may have thought because they would take their wicks and they would coat them in a thin layer of wax. So I might think that when we're saying that you're not allowed to use wax, it's not just as like an oil, as a fuel, right? I assume maybe the fuel is the right word. I don't know. I may have thought that it's not just as like a shemen that you're not allowed to use wax for. Maybe even if I have a wick that I coat, that wick would be possible. So kamash malan, that no. When we say that up until pitch, we're talking about things that are not allowed for a wick. From pitch and on, we're talking about oils. And wax is not allowed as an oil, but it would be allowed if to coat your wick, no problem. Rami bar oven, said Rami bar oven, itrana, tar, psulta de zifta. So tar is the psolas of zephes. I believe if I understand correctly, I read somewhere that to make zephes, they would, or maybe it's just from Rashi, that basically, I guess to get tar and pitch, they would like burn wood or whatever, and like the pitch and tar would come out of it, and then, but the clear part would be the tar, and the thicker part would be the pitch, I guess. Okay, shaiva psulta de duvsha, and wax is the byproduct of honey, is the psolas of honey. My nafkamina, why do we need to, have these specific declarations, descriptions? So the mekach memkar, the nafkamina is for, buying and selling things, right? If you're going to buy pitch or tar, or wax, you want to make sure you're buying the right thing. So wax would be the byproduct of honey, tar would be the byproduct of making pitch, etc. Okay, shkayach everybody. That was daf chaf of Masechta Shabbos. Let's just sum up. What did we do today? So we started with what is considered, when you have to cook meat before Shabbos, what's considered having already cooked it. So we introduced the concept of Maichel ben Drusai, right? Cooking 1/3 like this bandit ben Drusai, which is interesting. Okay, we began, and then we started getting into all sorts of technical definitions as well. We talked about, how much is considered lighting a fire, that you would have to light the fire a majority. Then we got into all sorts of technical definitions of things. We started a new chapter of B'mem Adlikin, talking about lighting Shabbos candles, and what can be used for wicks, what cannot be used for wicks, and oil as well. Also, continuation of some technical definitions. Stay tuned for tomorrow. We're going to get into a very interesting topic, and that topic is Hanukkah. So stay tuned. Have a really great day, everybody. Bye-bye.